is Martin Utschig, and I'm the author of Integral Relationships, a Manual for Men, and my most recent book, Sex, Purpose, Love, Couples in Integral Relationships, Creating a Better World. And today I'm very excited to be here with my friend Michaela Böhm, who is a therapist extraordinaire, highly sought of, and specialist on the feminine and masculine polarities. She trained for a few years with David Deida, whom most of you probably know. And she's also the author of the upcoming book, The Wild Woman's Way. So buckle up, we're with a wild woman together today. So you can participate by typing in your name on the right side of the screen and share with us where you're joining us from. And if you are single and looking for a partner, you may also share your integralsingles.com screen name or your Facebook profile name. And then you can also, into the conversation, if you feel so inclined, join us live. There is a little hand symbol on the top right side of your screen that you can click on. And then you need to download a little plugin, and it works best on Google Chrome. And once I accept your request, you will come online. And please be aware that we record this conversation and it will be posted on YouTube. So you give your permission to be included into that replay. So without any further ado, welcome, Michaela.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And you are in Ojai, a little bit north of Los Angeles. I'm in Los Angeles.
Yes, it's about, an hour and a half north of Los Angeles. So.
Yeah, very beautiful place. And you're originally from Austria, so we're both native German speakers.
We do this whole thing in German and see what happens.
Your rate would probably go down to 1. So. And we're not going to go into it much, but I just want to say we both share a recent fate that both of our houses burned down, which was very sad for me to hear because you had a beautiful sacred space, right? Yeah, there. But we're not going to go into that today.
No, but it's a rare club we're in. Well, not so rare this year in California, but still a fairly rare club. So
yeah.
An interesting experience to share.
Yeah. So share with us a little bit how you became interested in the field of therapy, I guess, first, and then the field of relationships. And then I don't know what the consecutive, how it unfolded. And then you met David Deida at one point, I guess, and got involved in his work.
Yeah, well, it started way, way, way earlier than that because I had a fairly early childhood, very strong imprint. I talk a little bit about that in the book that's coming out because I was given the Mists of Avalon as a 12-year-old, and that somehow was my entry into spirituality, interestingly enough. And so I have a kind of a dual background where one part of me pursued psychology. I was very, very interested in healing modalities, and in Austria there isn't that much around. You can become a doctor or a psychologist. Those are pretty much your options. And so I pursued psychology as a means of engaging with people's situations and with a wish to help people in their situations. But I had a teacher from a fairly young age on that was a tantric teacher. I wasn't aware that she was a tantric teacher. I didn't find that out until a couple of years into it. But she was the lineage holder of a Kashmiri tantric women's lineage. It's passed down from woman to woman to woman. So engagement into what we call the masculine feminine domain started very, very early. And it was kind of an interesting dual entry into the material that I'm working with today because on the one end, I was really interested in forensics, interestingly enough. I always joke about this, that I learned more about the patterns that couples have in the field of criminal profiling. Than in classical psychology because the patterns of closure and the way people are attached or not attached, and the way people react to their intimate partners or lack of intimate partners is very specifically patterned. And once you understand the patterning and you understand the coping mechanisms within the patterning, you can very effectively work with that in couples therapy, also in individual work. So my tantric path and my path of counseling intersected very early. And then I kind of went on a very long, I think from 96 till fairly recently, a couple of years ago, I did every hour of 5 days a week a session, meaning I worked clinically with people. So I did over 40,000 client sessions in the time that I saw clients. Nowadays, I'm almost exclusively teaching and traveling, but for, I want to say, almost 18 years straight, 5 days a week, 8 to 9 people a day. Well, first individuals and then individuals and couples.
Couples. And when did you come to the US? Where was that?
I came to the US in 90. I moved permanently in 96, and I started seeing clients in 98. And I've had it ever since, clients in the US in 98. So the work I do nowadays draws very heavily, of course, from my experience, my clinical experience, because it's one thing to have, good theories about stuff. It's a whole other thing to see how these theories actually work or don't work.
Yeah.
Meets the road. And so particularly in the last, I want to say 4 or 5 years, I've departed quite a bit from the traditional understanding. I departed, from the traditional understanding of couples counseling a long time ago, but I now also have departed from the more mainstream understanding of the whole masculine and feminine, simply because certain things didn't work and certain things did work. So, my work's undergone probably a bigger shift in the last 4 or 5 years than in the 10 before then.
So you mentioned some kind of patterning that you saw in.
Well, I mean, anybody who works with people, realizes pretty quickly that even though we're all individuals and we do have very individual stories, there are certain themes, particularly in relationship, right? And over time, when you see enough people, the first time you see something specific, right, it's like, oh, wow, how did this happen? And then, of course, 10 years into seeing couples, you realize that there's a specific set of circumstances that repeat. The details are different and the dynamics are different. In the very small level, but on the bigger level, you can see themes and patterns.
Can you disclose what these patterns are in your experience?
Well, there's many of them. So if you talk about things that happen in relationship, we could say that there's a few that are prevalent, right? One of which people get together and they date and have a wonderful time, and
the hormones rush in, and
hormones are rushing,
sexuality, and
fantastic, everything's good. You talk till late at night. You're in this, we've all been there. It's an amazing being.
Yeah.
Then, of course, as time goes on, that wears off, and some of that is just hormonal, but a big part of it is that sexual tension or sexual attraction follows different laws than relationship. And so one of the things that I work with nowadays in teaching a lot is how do you recover that initial spark? Because the way it goes is it's all fine, it's amazing. Then people start dating, they start having common friends, they do things together. Eventually they move in. if they're lucky, right, they create a really wonderful relationship. They have a lot in common. Maybe they'll eventually have children. But even before then, usually what happens, the classic is, it's wonderful, but they no longer have sex, or very little. Right? Then, of course, happens one of two things. Well, I should say one of three things in California. Number one, people get somewhat dissatisfied because they would like the sexual relationship, and they go see a therapist. So that's one option. The other one is they start having children. That's a very common one, where it's then like, oh, I know what we can do. It's a bit boring now. Let's have children. Have children, then that defers the whole sex conversation for quite a while. Then usually have a second one, and then often, not always, I'm painting a very cynical picture. After the second one, at some point, they decide they can't get it together. That happened a lot, and I saw an enormous amount of that kind of patterning. There's resentment that builds based on the fact that there isn't enough intimacy of the sexual kind, or, for that matter, of any kind. Then, of course, the California version is the relationship becomes an open relationship. It's bringing spice into the relationship by opening the relationship or by cheating. Those are all kind of options around the patterns of not having enough sexual spark or sexual attraction or sexual excitement. And of course, there is, I'm painting a very black and white general picture, since you asked. There's, of course, the more psychological issues and issues of a nature that has to do with resentments or unfulfilled promises and things like that. In general, that comes later. The first thing that happens is people essentially become too much of the same. That's the issue that tanks the sexual attraction. Sameness. Sadly, the very things that make the relationship good make the sex boring.
That's an interesting statement, yes.
Because relationship is built on sameness. So even you and
attraction is built on
opposite.
Specifically on difference, on opposite attracts, right? And sameness gives familiarity and harmony.
But of course, to have a good relationship, you have to have sameness. And ideally, you have a lot in common, right? Common values, views on money, views on religion, views on politics, views on raising the children if you want children. Being in the same house is a commonality, liking others' jobs. So those are all things that create sameness, and that sameness is very good. The biggest mistake that happens in that particular domain is that people think that their lack of sexual attraction is a relationship issue. But it's not. It's a sexual attraction issue. Often they go to a couples counselor then, and they're told, well, spend more time together.
Learn to communicate.
Exactly.
Your feelings and your needs.
Exactly. Well, which most people who suffer from lack of sexual attraction do plenty of. Not everyone, but most people are really good at processing. And it's very good because it's, once again, it's a relationship tool. Relationship tools are tools that create sameness. If you have a relationship issue, you should go and see somebody who teaches you communication. You have an issue of non-compatibility, you need to go somebody and bridge the gap. Like, let's say you don't agree on the religious upbringing of your children. Well, that's an irreconcilable difference. Needs to be bridged for the relationship to work. All the things that make the relationship work are actually somewhat detrimental to the hot sex.
So I don't know how familiar you are with my work, but I kind of put out this proposal that when you're at different levels of consciousness, then often, you're not growing apart this way, but you're growing apart vertically, and then you have different value systems, and then it becomes very difficult to, find agreement or consensus. This nice German word Verständigung, for which there is really no English word, right? I understand you and I agree with you. This reaching Verständigung, consensus, is very hard. And we're going to talk next week with a professor of consciousness studies about these levels of consciousness and how that shows up in relationships, just as a side note.
Oh.
But then, of course, now we're all sitting on the edge of our seat about hearing about a silver bullet from you, how to bring the spice and the sexual. So with all the sameness, how do we create, I guess, the polarity to maintain the sexual aliveness or attraction or...
Well, the first thing, I mean, there's so much to be said about this. We just jumped in somewhere sideways, but one of the things that I personally, having been in this field for, 24 years now, 25 years.
Yes.
I have to say is that it is so much more important for the general sanity to be with somebody with whom you have good communication, understanding, and shared values.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the main things that happens, of course, is people get together. They've never really discussed the purpose of their relationship. And then, like you said, they grow every which different way apart and create havoc. Right? So having a good relationship is much harder to have and find than great hot sex.
Mm-hmm.
Believe it or not, because great hot sex or attraction, let's call it that, follows guidelines, right? It's almost like physics. Mm-hmm. So can play with the physics much more and much easier, and you can learn skills because it's just skill development.
Mm-hmm.
Skill development is much easier to achieve than the general opening of the heart towards another human with whom you are compatible, ideally in a long-term situation if you're up for that. Right?
Yeah.
So one of the big changes I've made in my work over the years is that I'm no longer defining the poles as strictly or as clearly as I used to. And there's a few reasons for that. Number one, times have changed, right? Times have so massively changed when it comes to men and women and how men and women operate in society and how things are perceived and how we work and computers and cell phones and, all of those kind of things. So,
but do you also see the empowerment of women as a shift in that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's part of it, right? Empowerment of women and the subsequent, I don't want to say disempowerment, but lostness of men in a certain way, right?
Yeah.
It's a whole other topic that, is a big can of worms to go into. So, and being a woman, of course, I'm enjoying the incredible privilege of this, ever since I was born, essentially. The generation of my mother were, first wave feminists. And I've, of course, harvested the rewards of that whole engagement. And, I personally, the way I live and what I do, I have unprecedented freedom as a woman.
Yeah.
That's not true all over the world or even all over the United States, but the people I see and the people I engage with most definitely are enjoying, quite a bit of empowerment and privilege. So because of that, and because of what I just said, times changing, women's empowerment, also situations around money, child rearing, you know, things like that. Nowadays, you don't have to have a man to have a child as a woman. You can buy them very easily. You can have children way later than ever before. You can raise them alone. Most women, they want to, can take care of themselves completely. So classical relationship in a certain way is somewhat obsolete, right? Doesn't mean we don't want it and our hearts don't yearn for things. And that's both in the relational and the sexual domain, but our freedom around that is very, even 15, 20 years ago. But what I was trying to say was I no longer slice it in masculine and feminine when it comes to those things. Masculine and feminine are good lenses, but there are one of many lenses. And the problem that I've, of course, encountered in my years of, you know, playing in those realms is that it makes people pigeonhole themselves and each other. And these terms are used almost as terms of aggression. You're not feminine enough. You're too much in your, you know, masculine.
Yeah.
Not told, or women say to men, you know, you're not masculine enough, or whatever. And it becomes this tool of gender war and, you know, a way to phrase a certain kind of a discontent that goes way deeper than those labels. So they're useful to understand certain aspects of us when it comes to the sexual domain, and not useful in the rest of our existence.
And how do you define these terms? Can masculine and feminine?
Well, that there in itself, right? We run into all kinds of problems because, of course, the dictionary way of defining masculine and feminine, masculine being somebody who exhibits male traits, feminine somebody who exhibits female traits, right? Then, of course, you have the whole new agey tantra, whatever, sacred sexuality way where masculine and feminine are conflated with men and women, which of course is absolutely not true, right?
Yes.
You have like the guys who stand in some, you know, they come to a workshop and they, you know, stare some woman's eyes and breathe deeply into their balls and they're totally tense and it's rather horrendous. And women who think they have to move like bimbo strippers, you know? So
it's like the banks of the river and the flow, kind of like being the masculine, feminine.
That's all true enough, but what does that actually mean? Right?
Exactly, yeah.
Because in every human being, there's equal amounts of masculine and feminine. Otherwise, you wouldn't function. And I mean, that's just, you know, when you look at the ancient tantric texts, you know, where Shiva and Shakti is what it was called back then, those were elements within, and you would learn how to identify them and cultivate them and harmonize them and then pull them apart for certain practices, right? That internal process. And then from there, you had what we could call a sexual preference, right? So meaning you enjoy one aspect of that scale in your expression as a human.
Yeah.
Right? Not in your expression as a woman or as a man, but in your expression as a human. And it happens to be that a lot more women than men tend sexually to engage in the feminine domain. And I can say what that is in a second. But that's not always true, and it's not true all around, right? It's not true in life. It might be true sexually. Most people have a preference as to if they want to be the one being taken, you know, swept up, taken somewhere, able to surrender into the flow of life and existence, or being the one who directs the flow, like you said, the banks of the river, and who engages with life by organizing life and moving life forward and putting certain restrictions on life so that life takes a shape and a form, right? So you can call that the feminine and the masculine aspect. That's very good and very true. And both of those are present in both people, because otherwise I would not have been able to make it here on this call on time.
Yeah.
Right? Because
yes.
my feminine might have wanted to play with the puppies.
Yeah.
Thought about setting an alarm or whatever. You know, there's all this stereotypical stuff, the wild storm, blah, blah, blah. Right? That's all true enough, but that doesn't mean I can't set my alarm, get up on time, feed myself, take care of my errands, deal with my emails, and be on this call on time.
Yeah, yeah.
That's theoretically my masculine.
Mm-hmm.
And so I need my masculine, and I enjoy my masculine very much. We talked before we got started with in the process of writing a book is a classic example of an inner alchemy of your two parts. Because you have equal amounts of flow and creativity and birthing, you know, as you have to have discipline and focus and conceptual thinking. And the marriage of those two becomes a book. Right?
No, I never thought about it that way, but it's absolutely true. It feels like birthing something, and
totally.
it is this.
Now my, so to speak, sexual preference lies in the creative flow. Right? So if I would engage sexually, I want to, you know, be the expression of life through my body. And I want to flow, and I want somebody else to guide that flow. But when it comes to pretty much the rest of my life, I also very much enjoy giving structure to my own flow. And I'm very good at it, you know, and enjoy that very much. But would I want to give structure to my sexual partner? No. Right? But so that's why it gets a bit touchy, because I am a woman. I certainly have a feminine sexual preference, so to speak.
Yes.
But it doesn't define me as a human being. Right? And that's true for many men as well. Many men are very finely feeling and very sensitive and very able to track life force and emotion and, you know, and all of those kind of things.
Yeah.
But their main preference is to organize things. So that's the thing to know.
Yeah.
That these terms have a very limited application. We really only have a sexual application.
Yeah.
You can not ever, ever, ever conflate masculine with men and feminine with women.
Yes, yes. I make a strong point about that too, you know, to differentiate actually between, you know, the biological sex and learn gender roles.
Yes.
You know, obviously biological being very rigidly, you know, for most people embodied. Gender roles are learned. Feminine and masculine can be embodied, potentially, at least in my vision, by males and females equally. And then I also go into the anima-animus complex, you know, as another gendered kind of like dimension of the unconscious in a way.
Right. Yes, and endlessly play. Now that said, of course, right, it's kind of comical. We were talking about this, and I just wrote a book for women on rewilding the feminine, right? So why it is important that we cultivate those inner polarities is that how they are expressed essentially happens through the body, right? Sex, life, and birthing of the creative or actual kind, right, happens in the body. These are somatic principles, really, not just mental principles. So what that means is that we as creatures of habit, and also as biologically male or female creatures, have a certain set of circumstances, bodily, energetically, emotionally. And whatever we do most is the thing that our body holds the shape of. So to be very specific, I'll use myself as an example there again. So I have a very strong willingness and joy and I don't know what to say, propensity to organize things and to make my own flow move through that organization, super organized in all ways, so that I have a structure for my creative flow.
Yes.
And But because of the nature of what I do, which is travel internationally all year long, right, which involves an enormous amount of logistics and venues and marketing, and I mean, when you look at how much goes into the teaching time, it's, I would say, 80-20, maybe, or maybe 70-30.
Yeah, yeah.
But so that means I spend a lot of time off my week when I'm not teaching, sitting right here, my temporary office, right? Doing things that require a certain kind of a physical activity, which is very, very heavy, unmoving in the body for the most part, right? And focused in a forward direction. So my body naturally takes that shape easier if I'm not careful. Than the kind of flow and life force moving through my body that I prefer as a human and sexually. So the reason to have feminine practices, we'll talk about the masculine equivalent, right? The reason to have feminine practices is not that I'm missing femininity or that I'm not feminine enough. It is because my body needs to practice these things at least equally the way I practice being focused.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's really obvious. So there is a reason to do, so to speak, feminine practices, meaning practices that deal with embodiment in through your body, feeling, expressing, life force, flow, those kind of things.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd say the same is true for men who work, desk jobs. They also need to enliven their bodies and be with their bodies, but they might also be in a situation where they do a lot of things and there's a lot of flow and there's a lot of dealing with things, and they don't get that restful centeredness that you would get, like, let's say, in meditation. So you would have to practice, depending on what kind of a human you are and what kind of circumstance, the modalities that give you the full range.
Yeah.
Because then sexually, if you are somebody who as a man, let's say, or as a woman, right, who wants to direct the flow of sexual activity, if you don't have the muscle, you can't do that. If you're weak in the direction department, you do masculine practices that allow you to focus and direct and strengthen those muscles. If you're weak in the surrender department, because you're doing and directing all day, you have to strengthen the muscles of your surrender, so to speak.
Yeah.
That's what the book's about, right? And I'm definitely wanting to go into men's work and men's practices at some point, because that has changed a lot as well. I started with a woman's book because I'm a woman and I know everything about what it's like a woman's body.
Yeah. So I have a question when does the directing part, so to speak, become oppressive or, limiting to the woman's flow and expression and surrender and receiving? I guess that's very difficult for men often to, this whole idea of women want to be ravished and taken. But then on the other side, of course, more very recently, the whole Me Too movement, right, where this goes sometimes somewhat and sometimes very extremely, right, into the abusive area.
Yeah. Where to start? Well, we're saying women and men, right? Simply because those are the prevalent streams, that you probably see and I see in the demographics we're working with. But it can be two women, it can be two men, it can be a man and a woman, right? Whoever is the more directive partner in the sexual occasion is enjoying pinning the wild energy, into a direction or corralling it into a direction. Right? And then whoever is the more energetic, life-filled partner, enjoys that little bit of restriction and direction, or a lot of restriction and direction, as a way to release themselves from the engagement into the direction, right? It's a feeling of being mindless and, all over the place in the best possible way. And that is a very archetypal, you see it, of course, through times and myth and all kinds of things, right? It's a very archetypal engagement. And the hunger for that engagement is very obvious when you look at what's probably one of, I don't know the statistics. I've never actually read it all the way through, but 50 Shades of Grey, right, is one of the biggest selling books ever.
Yeah.
Right? And it depicts some pretty asshole-ish behavior, not even particularly sexy or a turn on in my book, but really many millions of readers disagree with me, right? There's a turn on in that. But the turn on in that is the restriction, is the being told what to do, is the having to surrender. The 50 Shades of Grey is essentially kind of a substitute for the real thing, so to speak. And what I mean by that is it's very caricature.
Yeah.
Right? And it doesn't take a lot of things into account. And in the real world, Christian Grey would have a Me Too movement all of his own.
Yeah.
If I would actually behave the way the guy in the book behaves, he'd be having, real issues right now.
Yeah.
Rightly so, because, that's not how you play it. But that's not, it's a caricature, and it does something to a large amount of women because that spice of being able to release is a spice that's missing from a lot of our diets. So, but how do you reconcile that with abuse or lack of consent, or that's a very, very difficult set of circumstances. And of course, one of the I just did an interview about this. It was the New York Times, actually. There was a whole submissive sex in the age of Me Too, and I interviewed for that article because there is lots of women who say, wait, we actually like this, but now it's minefields. And of course, the minefield is when you engage with somebody who you don't really know on one end. And the other minefield is that if you engage without being fully connected to your own responses, you lack the muscle of proper boundary setting. So it's like a 1, 2, 3 punch, right? It's like if you don't have enough embodiment and enough connection to the sensations of your body, that you have a early warning system where something in your body goes, and you can cognitively go, wait a second. And then go, I don't actually like this. And then say no, which is the next, having the ability to set a boundary. And of course, as a woman, this is also true for a man, right? Pick someone whom you can trust in that domain. Those are the 3 aspects. And the first one and the third one go hand in hand because they both have to do with being intimate with the sensations of your body, right? Being intimate with the sensations that arise in the body and get translated in an actional item in the mind. And most of us have had instances where you have a conversation with somebody. Let's not even make it sexual harassment or something. You just have a conversation with somebody. And then suddenly, and you leave, and then you're in the car or even on the way home, and you're like, wait a second. That was actually a real shit thing to say, or a shit move or something. It took that long to filter through. And then, of course, it's too late. Right? Then you might have to go back and say, well, when you said blah, 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 I felt this. And that person goes, oh, well, how would I have known? You said nothing. You smiled. Right? Self-awareness, internal ability to read one's own signals is the first thing, right?
Yeah.
Then, of course, having enough wherewithal, enough internal and external training, and that might include therapy if there was previous transgression against boundaries, or, or in the olden days they had assertiveness training, or whatever, but a way for somebody to say no.
Yeah.
And also from the same internal noticing of what happens in one's own system, you could pick appropriate partners, right? Because you're not just going by the head or by some previous conditioning, you're going by signals. So that all said, people want it, but getting it is harder than ever.
Yeah.
And of course, when you're on the other side, when you're a man and you have to constantly doubt that what's being said is congruent with what's being felt in your partner, it's very hard.
Yeah.
So one of the things we teach in our workshops consistently as a kind of antidote to that, a training, we do a whole training on how to feel somebody else's opening and closing. Say the opening and closing of their heart, or the opening and closing of their body and their availability. And so we train people how to create, foster and deal with intimacy as feeling themselves and with that feeling another. Then being able to notice what's happening in another person. So not only feeling yourself, but feeling somebody else.
Yes.
And only when those things are solidly established do we play with the sexual attraction. We don't ever go there till those two things are solidly established.
Yeah.
So in the sexual attraction, when the person who is doing the organizing, so to speak, the ravishing, it gets a little bit, because a lot of people close down when it gets a bit darker or sexier, right? That's trained for, though, very easily. But so then they notice that the other person shrinks back and they can stop.
Yeah.
So in an established consensual relationship, you can play with those boundaries a lot easier because you have established essentially that you're in for the long run and you're willing to play. And of course, and explore. And of course, ever so often when you play and explore, particularly in the more darker sexual realms, you're going to make mistakes. You'll accidentally slap somebody too hard, or even, just you kind of slip and pull somebody's hair, and then maybe they're very offended, or maybe they actually like the hair pull.
Yeah.
But that's all something that can be much easier negotiated when you have an established relationship. But when you just start out, those things are very treacherous. Because you have to know how to meter your own internal life and feel the other person's internal life, and then take both of those into account, which is not easy. And so because that's not easy, and because most people weren't trained for subtle sexual engagement from a young age, right? Society, the best line of defense is being able to feel your own stuff and be able to set proper boundaries. Can't expect that somebody else knows that your yes or your happy smile is actually a no.
Yeah. So on the man side, it's a lot about being present and attuned to your partner and to focus on the breath, body language, verbal communication if it feels like it's needed, things like that.
Exactly. But like I said, I don't want to say from the man's side, because it's both people's responsibility.
From the masculine side, or both people's responsibility.
Responsibility. If you engage in sexual play and you enjoy a sexual play that's more on the polarized end of the spectrum, meaning ravishy, or however, the one who takes and the one who surrenders, it's a mutual responsibility that each person knows that the other person can set boundaries. Each person knows the rules of the engagement beforehand. It's not a matter of, the guy should feel what the woman needs. that's a recipe for disaster, because what if he doesn't?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Then he becomes the aggressor.
Yeah.
And she becomes the victim.
Yeah.
It's not quite that simple,
mm-hmm.
because there's two people playing, and you can't completely surrender to somebody whom you don't trust, for instance.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And you shouldn't ravish somebody who you don't trust.
Yeah.
Right? That's just really bad form. Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Time, but it's really, you know, and this is where those stereotypes of the woman being ravished and the man ravishing come in so forwardly. Because if you somehow have it in your mind that the only way your woman think you're masculine is if you ravish her to God, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
For some real rough shit, because you're not feeling anything. You're feeling dogma.
Mm-hmm.
You're fumbling in the dark for some ideal that's not in the body.
Yeah.
And become insensitive based on the goal outcome. And of course, on the opposite end of things, when you're a woman and you blindly, you know, kind of lay yourself down for any guy who can breathe a little bit and stare into your eyes deeply, and you ignore the warning signs because you want it so badly, you're also in for a, you know, potentially very unpleasant.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you see that a lot in the whole, you know, tantric spiritual community, where people get into these weird situations where afterwards they're all traumatized, and then they go and see therapists, and they form Facebook groups called what is it, Tantra Not Trauma or something like that. Right? It's like, well, a little bit distinction on the front end goes a long way. A little bit less Kool-Aid and a little bit more actual psychological underpinnings is good.
Yeah. So I kind of have a concrete case with a friend right now where the marriage is kind of where he wants much more sex than she wants, and it's you know, they're not at all new agey or anything, right? So even talking about therapy or tantra or anything is like, you know, and of course it takes two to want to do something, right? Instead of just not having sex or doing the blame game, kind of like. And of course you don't know that, but that seems to be so like a common topic, I guess, right? And this connection between head and you know, the David Schnarch thing in a way, and I'm just curious if you can say in general a little bit something like that. What specifically if one partner, you know, wants to bring back the spice and you know, the initial attraction, and the other partner is basically okay with like once a week some, you know, release sex or whatever you want to call that.
Once a week is still pretty good for most long-term couples, I have to say.
Yeah.
So, which is a sad state of affairs, but that you know, people don't have very few.
And I don't even have to go there, right? I mean, I've been in a relationship where the relationship was really good because of the sameness part, but the polarity part went out of the window. And well,
you know, I mean, I certainly would say that if one partner doesn't see a problem, the other partner does see a problem. That makes things a lot more difficult. But of course, the moment one partner has a problem, there is a problem.
Yeah.
Right. So
sure.
Partner goes,
if one partner has a problem, both partners have a problem, right?
Okay. So even if one partner says, well, I'm perfectly fine with once a week, you know, I have a busy life, I'm happy with it. And the other person says, well, but I want to hang from the rafters every evening after work because that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
It's a difficult situation because, of course, you can't, you know, you can make compromises in other domains, right?
Yes.
So if I want to eat out every night and my partner wants to stay home every night, well, we can probably work something out.
Yes.
We can probably come to some middle ground where we go and eat out 3 times a week and stay home 3 times times a week, 1 week, and then we stay home,
Yeah.
or whatever, right? Like we could be super, super consensual there if we can happen. That doesn't mean, though, that I wouldn't have secret resentment about not being able to go out every night.
Yeah.
And partner wouldn't have secret resentment, but you could work that out. Sex is different because, of course, there's a lot of mechanics in the sex that require the body to consent and the body to get involved. So you can't just say, okay, well, now we're going to have sex 3 times a week, because that's not exactly how it plays.
Yeah. And then even if they do, the sex may be very bad, right? Of course. and both feel then unfulfilled afterwards.
And when they divorced, the person who didn't want to have sex 3 times a week goes, well, you forced me. I had to have sex with you, or you would have left me, right? So that's how all kinds of stuff starts. So typically it's best to step back a bit and look at lifestyle, look at the requirements of each person as far as why does this one partner not want to have sex, right? Or want to have sex once a week? Well, maybe, they have a new child and she really isn't feeling like it. Or maybe, sometimes this happens the other way around. Maybe he doesn't feel particularly sexual because he's in the middle of a bankruptcy procedure, right? Or whatever, right? So there's those kind of aspects. Then there's the aspect of the preference of what kind of sex. Sometimes the partner isn't that happy with how sex goes, and so they're fine with it, and it's basically okay, but it's not exciting, while the other partner finds the partner very exciting. So those are some things to consider. And of course, you have to look at what are the reasons for having sex. Right? Some people like to have sex solely because they want to get their rocks off in the stress department domain, and who it's with is kind of an inconsequential second thing, right? Other people want deep, meaningful, intimate connection, and sex is their vehicle. So those are things that I would examine for that couple. And then maybe it turns out that what the partner who wants more sex wants is really the depth of the meaningful, intimate engagement. And then that can be worked with in the non-intercourse domain. Right? Or it might turn out that the other person doesn't feel that intimacy during the sex, doesn't want more of it. So then you can work with it in the intimacy domain. There is ways into these areas where you kind of take a much bigger set of circumstances into account, and you just don't go, well, if you were more masculine, she was tender. Well, probably. Yes. Could it be that the person who wants more sex is going at it in a very needy, whiny way, and the person who wants less sex is turned off by that? Absolutely. But that's a person by person deliberation that has to be made by those two people, and you can, kind of cookie cutter approach.
And when you look at things like, what I hear is like there's the social material, right? The day-to-day life aspect, and there's the mental aspect, there's the emotional, communicative aspect, the unconscious aspect, the physical, hormonal aspects. Where does the feminine, masculine for you kind of like, when you look at things like that, is that a part of each of these levels, or does that come in as a separate kind of domain? And you had what really also turned me on when I read your description was that the internalized feminine, masculine, and the externalized, because what I realized in when I wrote my first book, Ken Wilber has these 4 quadrants of the interior and the exterior, and if at all, he kind of like says, there's then the feminine and masculine polarities, and I realized they can be, you can be feminine in your interior and masculine in your exterior. Right. So I'm asking 2 questions now and say something. But maybe we can come back to this. Like, does that for you penetrate all the levels, of the material body, mind, heart, soul? the feminine masculine?
If you want to slice it that way, which is one of the many ways that you could slice it that way, yes, with all the above aforementioned caveats, right? But one thing that we could say specifically, right, like you said, there's the interpersonal, the psychological, the hormonal,
the spiritual even, right? Yes.
Right, there's all those aspects. If we talk purely sexual, if we only slice it in the realm of what in my tradition we call erotic friction, right? Which I think is such a fantastic word, because erotic friction says it all. It's highly erotic, but it's filled with conflict. The friction creates the hotness. Right? In the realm of erotic friction, how you create a stronger sexual attraction and spark is by creating opposites. It's by creating difference. That's what started with this whole conversation, right? You can, for the sake of the sexual attraction. Now, there might still be psychological and physical and medical things going on, but just from a bodily sexual attraction standpoint, you can make yourself different. And when
you can.
C-A-N,
yes. You cannot?
You can. You absolutely
can.
must, in order to have good, strong erotic friction. Right?
Yes.
My whole work centers around how do you do that? By training your body, by your internal processes, by working with a partner. Right? So you can pull apart. So how do you pull apart? Well, first things first, right? Don't spend all your fucking time together. So you want more sex on a purely sexual level. Don't spend every evening sitting on the sofa together in your matching sweatpants, watching Game of Thrones while eating popcorn.
Yeah.
It is not sexy. It creates so much sameness that there is no more two different people. And you see this, right? You see these, there's always this cliche, the elderly couple in their matching tracksuits with their embroidered names, driving the Winnebago through Arizona. Loving relationship, but you know they're not fucking. To say very, very, very crudely, right? Because they're the same human being. They look the same by now, right? That happens in much smaller increments and not quite as obvious in many relationships. It doesn't matter if you have a spiritual relationship where you get up together, you drink your green tea matcha latte, then you meditate, then you do your reading or whatever, or you get up, you dress the kids, you bring them, and so on and so on. The sameness aspect you can work with. And one of the ways to work with it is you spend time apart. You become separate human beings again. You don't constantly talk about the kids or the bills or your spiritual endeavors at all times. Learn how to delineate your individual life from your couple's life. Go and do different things with different people, and when you come back together, it's a lot more exciting. Right? It's very hard to when we talk about your friends where one person wants a lot of sex, the other person. It's not that easy to create the opposites and the difference when you spend all day together and you sat on the sofa together and talked about the bills while watching TV. Now you're going to bed. It's not gonna be fireworks. Unless you know how to suddenly pull it apart. But if one person goes out with his friends, let's say, and the other person engages in some very pleasant activity of the bodily kind, like dancing or taking a bath or watching something that's very pleasing and opens the emotions, and they do different things with different people, they come back together, they suddenly have something to talk about. Suddenly different humans, and difference creates the arc of attraction. And within that then fall things like one person being able to guide while the other person is willing to lay it down. One person being able to bring a lot of energy through the body while the other person is enjoying that energy. Then you have the play of the masculine and feminine externally. After internally, you have them both. You have both of those aspects in your quiver in your arsenal. So you can pull them out at will, and internally, and then externally, one person takes one end, the other person takes the other.
Yeah. So I feel a little odd right now I think that was great advice, and it sounds great. I just want to also express it. I'm also feel a little sorry that I brought this in. I just want to express how I feel in this moment. But maybe, hopefully, it gives good advice and helpful feedback for people who may be in a situation like that.
Yeah, we all go there. I mean,
yeah, we all go through these phases, I guess.
Nobody is exempt from that.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's so much more important to have a really good, meaningful, close relationship, not only sexually, but or in your sexual relationship, but in general. The other you can learn, and once you understand the mechanics and the principles, you can, it's not rocket science. It really is.
So how can people engage with you? Now, everybody, of course, wants to meet you and go to a workshop or...
Well, thankfully, I'm fairly easy to catch. So for people who are not where I'm teaching, I'll say in a moment where I'm teaching, but people who are not where I'm teaching, I have a SoundCloud account. You can go to my website. I'm assuming you'll post that. It's michaelaböhm.com, BOEHM.com. And on the website, on the homepage, there's a link to SoundCloud. There's over 100 hours of free lectures and Q&A sessions and recordings and interviews where I tell into absolutely everything, right? One or two a month. So there's lots of material there that people can listen to. That's completely free, of course. I teach in Australia, in Europe, England, and America. So there's lots of different places where people can catch me. The next couple of months is next weekend. I'm teaching a women's intensive here in Ojai. Then we're going to Australia for like a really full program, both the more sexual, polarized stuff, and also teacher trainings and new events. And then end of May, we're at 1440. Steve, my co-teacher, and I, we're doing a big event for science and non-duality. The people from science and non-duality.
That's in the North Bay, isn't it?
1440 is by Santa Cruz, I believe.
Oh, okay, yeah, Northern California or San Francisco area. Yeah,
and it's called Radiant Intimacy, and it's going to be a lot of fun. It's Esther Perel and I and Sasha Cobra, and then Steve, my co-teacher, Lauren and Camille, Lauren Roche and Camille Marine, who are amazing. And there's two people I am now forgetting. Excuse me for forgetting them. So it's a whole, and did I say Sasha Cobra?
Yes, you did.
Interesting stuff, and so it's a whole wide variety of people working on intimacy. There's I think neurobiologists there and all kinds of fun stuff.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and then I'm doing 5-day intensives, which is really the way to engage with this material, men and women, in Ojai in June and in Amsterdam in July, and then in October in Australia. So, loads and loads and loads happening. The book's coming out August 21st. In conjunction with the book, there'll be all kinds of also online stuff.
Well, it was great to see you again in this virtual world, and to thank you for sharing all this wisdom with us.
Thank you.
Because it is a huge part of the integral relationship model is obviously the feminine, masculine, and sexuality, and great work. And I drew from your wisdom and David Deida's wisdom, of course. So anybody who's not familiar with that work, I highly recommend it.
I think David and I no longer have the same philosophy on these things, right? I left a few years ago because my view on things has shifted substantially. But he has a very distinct view on it, and so do a few other people who are heavily involved in the masculine feminine domain. And yeah.
All right.
You
Well,
never even looked at the chats, did we?
I did, and there were just a few people agreeing and being grateful for what you're sharing. So,
well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for those of you who listened live.
Yeah.
And, yeah, thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Michaela. And I have the great pleasure to drive to Las Vegas now to do a masculine trade show where there is 95% male. So it's always interesting for me to be in this male masculine business world, you know.
I have the great pleasure of going to the plant store now.
Okay.
To recreate a vegetable garden. So that's my weekend before teaching starts happening again next week. All right.
So can you repeat the website? It's Michaela, BOEHM.com.
So it's Michael with an A at the end. Michael A, BOEHM.com.
Yeah, you were broken up, so it's BOEHM.
Correct.
Yes.
So Michael, then an A, then a B, OEHM.com. And I'm assuming you're posting it on there.
Yeah, I will post it as well.
All right.
All right. Thank you. Namaste. And hopefully at some point we're going to do this again and continue the conversation.
Yes. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye. And thank you everyone who joined us, and have a wonderful weekend. And next weekend, we do this every Saturday from 10 to 11. We're going to talk about consciousness, but specifically in the context about what does it mean when a woman says, I want to be with a conscious man. So that will be another interesting conversation. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks.